Okay, so for this video, I'm going to look at the teachings of AJ Miller. The reason why I'm doing it is because I get serotonin for making these videos, and I feel much better when I do that. I also feel a little bit of sympathy for AJ because I do believe that he was the Jesus, because I believe that he had visions just in the same way that I did. He had visions of being Jesus, I had visions of being Eve, and I feel sorry for him because he's had to go 10 years of teaching things. Okay, I think he's teaching lies most of the time, but it's kind of amounted to nothing. But I feel like I can empathize because I've gone through a similar thing. I've been teaching about how I'm Christ and God, and 11 years later I still haven't made any money. I'm still living in a shitty kind of life. I've always known that this Jesus character was actually the Antichrist, someone who's like me, only not me, teaches the wrong things, but comes with sort of peace and love to help people. I was always thinking that there would be an Antichrist, but because I never really saw the importance of AJ, I never really looked at his teachings. But yeah, since nothing's happened, since I'm still living in isolation, since I've got nothing better to do and I get serotonin for making these videos, I've come across him and I've actually done a little bit of research into him. And, before I was thinking that he was just like Jesus in the past life, and now, I don't know, I didn't really care what he was preaching now because it doesn't matter. I'm the real Christ, I'm here, my teachings are more important. But now that I realise that I'm hugely angry and my mental instability is not good, that I feel like this spirit is guiding me to say that this guy does have an importance because I can learn spirituality through him. I have not really looked at spirituality or the teachings of spiritualists because I think they're making things up a lot of the time or saying things that are not true. But with AJ, I do feel a strong spiritual connection, hence I feel like I can teach things through his teachings, and I feel in a way that would give more credit to his life, more credit to his teachings, not because I'm saying that they're right or correct, but because I feel like the Spirit is leading him to say certain things so that maybe I could pick up on them and give my interpretation of what he's saying. Everyone has a spirit, and this spirit guides them into saying certain things, but I do feel a strong connection. My spirit does feel a strong connection with his spirit, and I feel like, his spirit is getting him to say certain things so that I can interpret it and learn something from it. I get smarter as I learn. In that same way, so do you, or so can you. The more I look at things, the more I learn, the more smarter I become. So I'm doing this for, I guess, my own sake, to become smarter. Okay, I get serotonin from them. And I also like the idea of teaching people something. But yeah, it does make a little bit not sense because I don't understand why I'm bothering to teach, because I just want to give up on this world, but I'm not doing that. So let's just make this video. I have to also add though, that another reason why I'm making this video is because I feel like when it comes to this kind of teaching that he's been doing, I keep getting an image of this in my head.
It's me, Sand. Night, Sand.
Doofy!
So a lot of times we are actually connecting at a soul level, but it's only for moments in time. It's not all the time. And in fact, in the end, what we'll see is that God actually created us where we have our sexual expression 100% of the time. So all the time you would be in you would have a sexual expression relationship with your soulmate, is what God intended. Which is a very...
She likes that idea.
You like that idea, right?
Oh yeah.
All right. You wanted to say something about it?
No, I just like your definition of sexuality. It's actually soulality.
Yeah. So can you see that we're not really talking about sexuality, we're talking about soulality, or the connection that occurs at the soul level. Does that make sense?
So it's like, yeah, because of course we're all attached, as he tells us all the time. If you can harness the power of your soul in the sex act, then it obviously becomes far more beautiful, more powerful, rather than just acting on those two.
Yeah. And in fact, if we look at it from God's perspective, God created you through a sex act. Right? So God actually had sex to create you could say.
I feel like AJ was the Antichrist, but I feel like he still is the Antichrist. And I also feel like I've been trying to look for an Antichrist. And okay, I was thinking along the lines of Elon Musk or something, but I also realized that I don't want to affect his businesses. If someone does turn out to be like a false Christ, their business is going to collapse, their money is going to collapse, and I don't want that. I like businesses, they help jobs. And therefore, if there is going to be some sort of anti-false Christ, this person needs to actually be kind of poor, like not rich. He needs to be someone who relates to the public, someone that the target market is going to like. And the target market are, I guess, the Christians who I want to target so that they can get into heaven.
It's got to be someone who was connected with all the victims, someone who knew about the accident, someone who could move around without being noticed.
Oh my God.
She used to babysit my brother Doofy. He had the biggest crush on her.
It's me, Send. Night, Send.
How does God have sex? You remember that God has masculine and feminine qualities. And if you can think of it like this, at the moment you are a half of the soul, and when you have sex with the other half of the soul. Whether it's your soulmate or not, you're engaging in sexual interaction with another half of your soul, of a soul. Now, the two of you are sort of like a part, aren't you? Now, if you can think of God's soul as those two halves together constantly as one, then basically you start understanding what sex is for God. Does that make sense? And you will actually be in that state in the 22nd sphere, in the spirit world. In the state where you're actually having sex constantly because you are now joined with your soulmate. And so God's constantly having sex. If you could think of it that way.
Doofy!
Dan? Have you seen Doofy?
No?
Have you seen Doofy?
No, Sheriff.
Has anybody seen Doofy?
Yeah, just went out the back, Sheriff.
Doofy!
To just explain what I think that scene is actually referencing, I do not agree with AJ's teachings. I think what he just said there is a load of shit. I am not constantly having sex. I don't believe he knows anything about me or who I am, or at least he didn't when he was making these videos. I don't even believe in soulmates. I think your soulmate is your spirit, and okay, yes, my spirit is connecting with all your spirits, but I don't think it's a sex act, although I'm sure sex can actually help build a stronger spiritual connection, but it's got nothing to do with the physical, and so people watching me have sex is going to do nothing but make me angry because I don't want people to see things like this. If they are seeing it and it's like a fake AI version of me, then I don't mind, so long as you get some sort of fake AI that has nice tits. But if these tapes were real and against my will, then I would hate the person who would want to watch that or would want this to happen to me. I don't agree with what he's teaching. But if the world is planning on setting up some kind of fake rape or whatever, his teachings kind of support what might need to happen, but not in reality, only in sort of their view on what's happening in reality. I know there's a lot of people that think like animals, act like animals, and sex is what animals do, although they see it in a more rape sense. They think rape is okay because they don't know how to be human, and if you think rape is okay, then it's sort of an indication that you need to go back to being an animal. Hence, I feel like there is an importance of some sort of test where it's like a fake sacrifice. But yeah, if you want to tell people the same nonsense that this Antichrist is saying, which is that the only way you can become one with God is where you try and fantasize about having rape with me or whatever, I don't agree with this teaching, but if you're an idiot, you're welcome to agree with it, and yeah. I think this is the angel of positivity, or technically I think it's angel of sarcasm if it's a negative view. But yeah, this weird guy ended up getting in the car with this sort of reporter, and I feel like this is just a prophecy of something that might need to happen. The press can take AJ Miller, maybe emphasize all his beliefs if he will still believe them, or if it will be something that he knows isn't actually the truth. I don't know if he knows at this point in time, but it doesn't really matter, because if it's all fake and if it's just the press saying whatever they want to say, they can take things like this, they can make him the sort of Jesus figure and give all the evidence to prove that he was actually the Jesus of the past. I agree with this statement that he was, but I also think that he's full of bullshit, basically. And he also looks like a dork in a lot of his videos. And in a way I can say a similar thing about Donald Trump, only he's a lot richer and less religious. You know, I feel like Donald Trump has a big audience. You know, I like Donald Trump, but technically I don't actually like anything that he preaches or that he teaches or that he says. But I feel like he needs to say all this because he targets a certain market of people, a type of market that I don't actually like. But I feel like this is why whatever's happening to him is happening to him, because it's trying to make him seem like the average person. The people that I don't really like would like him because of all this stuff that's going on. I don't really know what's going on, but by making him look like he's against the elites or being targeted to be against the elites, you know, all the people that hate the elites are going to like him. But I feel like the smarter people are actually going to be taking a more sit back kind of approach and just being like, you know what, I don't know what's going on, it doesn't really make sense, but I'm not really in favor of the things that Donald Trump promotes or says. You know, I think that's what the smart person would say, but the misled person might say something different. So that last video I looked at was a video of him talking about sex, and I just thought that was ridiculously funny, so I needed to start with that first. But I'm not going to touch on that video because I don't want to talk about sex. But yeah, this next video is about sin.
In this presentation, titled Attitudes to Sin, Jesus discusses why I must examine my attitudes to sin if I wish to remove sin, God's attitude to my sin, general beliefs about sin held by most people, and then briefly summarizes some common, specific negative attitudes to sin, recorded on the 24th of February 2019.
So to clarify, I'm God, you can't know what sin is because sin is turning against me, and if you don't know me, then you don't know what turning against me is. Sin is turning against me and basically doing things that I don't want, e.g. if I don't want to drink something that's full of spiders that is all grounded down, or cockroaches, you know, if I don't want to drink fermented eggs or whatever, you know, forcing me to do something like that, that is sin because it's going against my will. Okay, you can have other views, which is that I think there's way too many people on the earth, and so you should be encouraging as many abortions as you can because this will help reduce the population so that the matrix can be more selective on which souls get to be human and which ones have to stay as an animal. But yeah, if you don't know me, you won't know what my will or choice is, hence you won't know what sin is. But technically there are some things that are done against my will and yet they turn out to be for the greater good. So just because they are against my will, that doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. So that's why you should understand what sin is, but also know that sometimes sin is not wrong. When it comes to you and your penis, I don't care what you do with it so long as you only put it in people who want it to be in them. And also when it comes to like kids and stuff, you know, a 15-year-old might really want to have sex with you, but if that 15-year-old is going to grow up and look back on that moment and remember that moment as the time that, you know, ruined her life, because after that moment she then turned into a prostitute and started having sex with lots and lots of people, and, you know, she looks back and regrets everything that, you know, was forced on her, or things that she thought was right at the time but only because she was being misled by the people that got her to like sex in the first place. You know, that's not a good thing and that is sin. But, you know, if she just saw that as just something that she wanted to do, then it's not actually that wrong. So for this reason, it is important to understand what sin is. It's doing something against someone's will or something that will later cause them to regret what's happening at this moment if they are, say, too young to make the choice for themselves on what is right and what is wrong.
Started. Attitudes to sin. Why do we want to examine our attitudes to sin? Well, it's pretty clear, isn't it, if you think about it, that obviously we've got specific attitudes to sin that we probably don't want to own up to, right? And for many of us, we like to call them fears. And to be honest, for mostly when we're calling things fears, most of the time they're angers.
No, that's not a correct teaching. I would say that what is wrong with people's attitude towards sin is that they think they know what sin is, and they don't. So they would say that this is sin, you shouldn't do this, that's wrong. But in reality, they don't actually know what is wrong and what is not. You know, if a man wants to dress up as a woman, a lot of people would claim that that is a sin because it's against God, when it's not. They are trying to talk for me and they don't know me, so they don't know what sin is. So that is the problem with sin, is that people claim to know what it is and they don't. There's a ton of laws that aren't actually that bad, and people would use laws to try and say that, you know, a crime has been committed. This 15-year-old has slept with an 18-year-old. This is a crime and we're going to lock that person up. But in truth, they don't realize that actually maybe that 15-year-old is very mature for her age. Maybe she really did like that 27-year-old. Maybe she did actually want to do that act. and therefore it's no longer a sin because of the maturity that that person has. Now, a sin is to not recognize that what something has happened to someone, it's not wrong. Now, if it happened to a different person under different circumstances, then it might be wrong and it might be a sin because it has caused that person to be damaged or hurt or affected in a way. But sometimes, the same crime can be committed on someone, but it's not a crime because it hasn't affected them in a negative way. It hasn't hurt them. I would say that there's lots of faults in the justice system because the justice system has been designed to punish people for crimes that they've committed rather than focus on the effects of the crimes. For example, if you kill a man who didn't want to be killed that day, but has had a history of him trying to commit suicide, or a history of him overdosing and just causing lots of people problems, or maybe a history of threatening to kill other people, killing that person is going to get the murderer a very long sentence because the justice system will judge that person in the same way that they would judge a person who's just committed a murder of an innocent person or a person who didn't want to die. So what I'm saying is I don't think you should judge people in some type of category, but rather you should look at the circumstances or the details of the case to work out the effects of what was caused. It's bad to steal someone's phone, but if that person has loads of phones and you've technically just stolen something that someone didn't really want, then the punishment for that crime should be less because that person didn't really care. I feel like the justice system is wrong because it focuses on the crime rather than on the reasons for the crime or the effects of the crime or the damage that it causes. And it doesn't look at the details on who you're damaging. If you're hurting bad people who hurt others, then the crime is not as bad. And also I feel like they also ignore the fact that some people lie. Some people can exaggerate how much something has affected them, make out that it's so much worse than it actually was, and they'll be doing it just to punish people rather than to actually get justice for something that they've faced.
Rather than fears. In other words, we're using the word fear because it's society accepted, that anybody who's afraid needs to be cared for, looked after, commiserated with.
I have no idea what you're trying to say, but this word fear has actually reminded me of what's going on with the social services. I feel like there have been some children that have gone through a really bad experience with bad parents, and social services have played on this fear that people have of, there being loads of these cases. For example, last week I was telling my mum that I felt that this was unnecessary what they were doing to Marco. Sophie was a bad parent, but Marco was a really good parent, so it was completely unnecessary. And her response to me was, well, they have to take all the precautions that they need to take because, there are these people, they are very dangerous people. And I was just thinking, what, they're playing on your fear. They're doing something unnecessary to Marco, which is to, watch him and monitor him and visit him every day, and then have long tests where he fails one and passes the other, and now they're saying he needs another 6 weeks, even though there's nothing wrong with his ability. And I feel like the only reason why they can do all this is because they're playing on people's fears like my mum, who's an idiot. They're playing on people's fears by saying, these people, they could be bad, we need to have all these extensive tests. And I didn't think that you need to have an extensive test. I think you just need to have a small conversation with him, or have a conversation with his 8-year-old child, and you'll know that there's nothing wrong with him. But I feel like they've taken fear and the fear of other people that these, there's lots of dangerous people around, and they're using this to get money from the government to back up this oversupport that isn't support and isn't helping families. And yeah, it's wrong because they made him leave work to go home to pick the child up and take the child to another person who they have met and who they have spoken to, because the child wasn't safe with me and my sister. Okay, yes, they've done the test, they know it's not safe with my sister, but they haven't done the test to know that it's not safe with me. But they should have been able to talk to him to know that he wouldn't leave the child with me if he didn't feel that the child was safe. So they should have trusted him enough on his views on what was safe and what is not. But I felt they don't. They have this fear of everyone, and it's affecting good people who have nothing wrong with them because they're being accused of being a monster, even though these people don't know me. It's a sin because it's going against people's will, it's going against people's choice by accusing everyone of being a potential monster when that's not the case. They're playing on people's fears to fund this, and I feel like they have used this fear of, their bad parent to get lots and lots of money from the government to try and fund, social services. But a lot of this social services work that they're doing is actually harming families. It's actually making families feel afraid or feel scared out of the social workers for taking their kids away from them, or being extra critical. Sometimes it's necessary, but I feel like with some people it's not. You might have a bad mum, but everyone else around might actually be decent people who can help, and I feel like social services would put that mother in a category and then use fear as a way of getting funding from the government by saying, we don't trust this mother can't do it, here's the proof that this mother can't do it, and then they'll be playing on other people's fears to try and assume that everyone around that child is also under that same lack of ability to do things. And that is an example of people playing on fear to try and do something. It's true that I don't know many cases of social services, maybe my case is an exception, but the same thing can be said in the justice system and when it comes to putting people in prison. A lot of people think that there are a lot of bad people in the world, and it's the truth. There are a lot of bad people in the world, but people might play on these fears that they have to help put more and more people in prison. These people are bad people exist. Can we have money to put people in prison? But sometimes they can go over the top of it, and they take the fears that they have of other people to try and justify putting more and more people in prison for longer lengths of time, used or based on this fear that they have that, all the people that are locked up in prison need to be in prison because they're dangerous people. And I think a lot of it isn't the truth. I think there's a lot of people that are in prison for non-violent crimes. Maybe they just wanted to sell drugs to make money, but they've sort of demonized these drug dealers and made them out to be far worse than they actually are. And they're playing on people's fear to do such a thing because they're saying that all these people are bad, we can't let them go, they're a danger to society, and a lot of them really aren't. So I have no idea what AJ's talking about, but what he's talking about inspired me to say that. And this is how fear can be turned into sin, because you don't know someone, you don't know if they're good or bad, you don't know what they're really like. And if some people are saying, we need money to put this person in prison because they're dangerous, your fear is going to make these people go in prison even if they're not dangerous. But the fear of thinking that they might be the dangerous ones, they might be the sharks, this is going to create more sin because a lot of them might not be that bad. Or maybe someone should face a year or two in prison, but you're not giving them a year or two in prison, you're giving them 30, 40 years in prison because of the fear that you have over the potential that they are a bad person.
But anybody who's in anger, society perception is, they need to look after themselves, right? Generally. So what we do is we label a whole lot of our angers as fears. And that helps us get away with actually examining what our true attitudes are.
I think that's the truth when it comes to how people deal with people that are on trial. Someone could be on trial and other people can be like, yeah, that person's hurt me and I'm upset, I'm going to go on trial and talk about my cases, but they might see this as an opportunity to actually hurt that person, and they might not necessarily be doing it because they want to hurt that person, but they might be filled with a huge amount of anger from things that other people have done and got away with. And say they've had a bad boyfriend, and then they've had another bad boyfriend, and then they have another bad boyfriend, and then they find out that this third bad boyfriend later on is up for potential prison and they can testify against them. They'll be focusing on all the bad points of that bad person, but they'll actually be using the anger that they felt from all the other bad people. I'm thinking about R. Kelly when it comes to this case. Yes, I'm thinking about Kelly, but that they're using anger to try and hurt an individual. Why? Because they see that opportunity to hurt that person, and really they're just acting on anger, but they don't know their own state, they don't know their own condition, they don't realize what they're doing. They're thinking they're just getting justice when really they want justice for all the people that have hurt them, and they can't do that because there's not enough money to put everyone on trial for every crime they've ever committed. So they're just seeing an opportunity and taking it.
And also it's been designed in most cases to try to get or enlist other people's support for your fears. And when you think about it, that's pretty angry to do, isn't it? If you think about why we talk about fears, is frequently because we are trying to get other people to agree with our fears and to agree that we should not ever have to deal with these fears.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you relate this, what you're talking about, to the case of R. Kelly, there was a whole group of people that maybe didn't like having someone sort of tell them what to do or boss them about it. Maybe the same thing happened to Diddy, or maybe if there's a company that is selling drinks that are too hot. You know, there might be a whole group of people that want to sort of support each other and be like, yes, that was too hot, we're all going to sue this company and try and get money from it. And they started playing on other people's fears that, you know, this guy is in some sort of a cult, or maybe the company that you love and trust isn't actually what it is. You know, maybe they do have alternative genders, maybe Facebook is allowing people to support false views and are influencing kids. You know, they play on people's fear and they use their anger to try and build up some sort of group belief that this is wrong, when really it could just be like a group delusion, whilst playing on the fear that, you know, what they believe could be the truth, and that he's misleading people and that he's doing something wrong to people, and they're playing on people's fears and the anger and building up some sort of, you know, group anger, and they're just liking the sort of support of having other people agree with them. And I think they're fueling themselves off this sort of unity that they're forming, even though the unity is actually being formed because of this sort of hatred over one person or a certain company, depending on what we're talking about. But this hatred over that one person might not actually be a true perspective on how they should see things or how things actually were at the time. You know, at the time they just saw this as, wow, they're with a famous person, you know, this is good. Or if their kids are seeing things on Facebook, you know, they'll see this information as being, wow, this is the truth, you know, I'm learning something, even if it's not actually the truth. Okay, later they probably thought, okay, I feel maybe used or something, but they're using this I feel used to turn themselves into a victim. But by turning themselves into a victim, they feel like they've got like a whole unity, a whole support, because other people feel the same way. And I feel like they're using it to comfort themselves, but they're doing it out of the wrong reasons. They shouldn't be comforting themselves by learning from their experiences, not just trying to turn a past event into something that it wasn't, whilst refusing to put any blame on themselves and just putting the blame on someone else. You know, that's kind of what Christianity teaches, you know, don't blame yourself, blame Satan. And I feel like this belief has affected people, and it makes them sin, because it makes them want to, you know, see a person or a company as being the victimizer and you as being the victim, rather than acknowledge that actually you chose to believe that, or you chose to follow it, you chose to go down that path. They would turn that and be like, oh, stop victim blaming. And, you know, sometimes victim blaming is a true thing and sometimes it's not. Sometimes people would use victim blaming as a way of, you know, trying to prove that you are just an innocent victim when really you're not.
That we should not ever have to, you know, do anything that might just touch upon those fears in any way. So you can see that our attitudes to sin are frequently quite distorted. We have a distorted perception of even our own attitudes towards sin. So that's the reason why we need to look at this subject. So if we understand that my attitudes to sin are crucial to identifying and waking up to the sins that I commit. You see, while I have an attitude that's like, I'm afraid, do you think in that state that you really want to wake up and see the sins you commit while you're afraid? Isn't it most of the time we're saying, I'm afraid, so that justifies pretty much any action I take? Yeah. So you can see that unless I see my attitude to sin, I'm not going to wake up and identify the sins themselves.
I have to comment on this. You know, what you've said kind of makes sense if you're talking about what I've just said, you know, people putting people in prison, social workers assuming that every person they meet is a terrible mum, even if that's not the truth. You know, this is all playing on people's fears. So it relates to the justice system, it relates to social services. I'm not too sure what else it relates to. It might relate to your life. You know, you might assume that your neighbour is a bad person because you've heard yelling or screaming and you're just assuming that, oh, something's terrible is going on there, you know. So it can apply to your everyday life. You fearing that people are bad, you fearing that someone's doing something wrong, and you wanting to seek justice and sort of hurt them in some way, or just avoid them or not talk to them. But it only becomes a sin when you actually start doing something that hurts them. You know, if you just think, they're my neighbours, I don't know what's going on, I'm just going to stay out of it, you know, that's not a sin, and that's not relating to playing or acting on fear. I mean, maybe you're not getting involved and maybe something is going wrong, but you fear that the fact that it might actually be kind of dangerous for you to be in that position. You know, there's a lot of people that might see other people attack someone in a hotel room. The Diddy image came into my head. And maybe you don't want to get involved or don't want to report it to the police in case this is some sort of, you know, dangerous sex trafficking ring and you don't want to get involved, so you're not helping people, it's not a sin. But if you know someone's in danger and you know someone's being hurt, to not act on it or to not try and help them is a type of sin, because it's not what they want. They would probably want you to help them. If there's some video of, you know, someone being treated like scum, you know, they would want this to go to the police so that these people can be caught. So sin is where you do things not just against God's will but other people's will. You know, if someone doesn't want something to happen and you are forcing this to happen, then that is a sin, I guess, if they are innocent and don't deserve that. If you take someone's child away from them, they might not want that to happen, but if they are shit at looking after children and are generally a danger to their child, then it has to happen because you need to put the child's needs first. But in some cases the child is not in danger, the mum's just a bit scatty every now and then, and therefore you're actually doing harm to that child, because that child is going to be growing up in foster care, and the mum is going to start hating that child and social services and everyone around for doing this to her. You know, if you generally love a child and you've got a bunch of people telling you shit at it and you can't do it, you know, you're only going to end up feeling anger towards that person. That's how I feel towards social services now, because they didn't allow me to have Leo. You know, it's made me hate humans so much because of that. And it's easy for me to see how, you know, if you are a kind of bad mum, you know, and your child is forcibly taken away from you, you know, you might want to put some of that anger that you have been received from these people onto the child, because you regret kind of having the child and making you feel all this hatred towards these people. So you might have wanted the child, but after, you know, years of abuse from social services, you know, you might no longer want that child, and therefore social services have actually just created a bigger divide towards you and your son's now going to grow up feeling unloved because of everything that's gone on. So have they really helped this family, or have they hurt this child? And same with a prison sentence. You know, if someone deserves to go to prison for a year but you put them in prison for 4 years, you know, they're going to hate everyone. They're going to hate you for the decisions that you've ruled over them, for forcing them to do something. And likewise, not doing something when they actually want you to do something, that too can be considered a sin if what you need to do is so easy as just report something. But yeah, you haven't said any of that. You're just kind of talking about, I don't know, the fear, but you're not explaining what it is, and the audience is just staring at you as if they have no clue what you're talking about. You know, you can hear the crickets go cheep 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 cheep.
All I'm doing is justifying that they should remain. So that's not a good thing. And also, unless I understand my attitudes, I won't really examine or understand my motivations to sin.
I think people's motivation to sin is a lack of caring or a lack of consideration towards others. They think this person could be a danger, so I'm just going to do things against that person's will because I don't care. But because of this whole I don't care attitude, you know, it's only going to be a matter of time before other people start feeling the same way towards you. You know, if someone deserves to be in prison for a year and you give them 3 years because you're part of the jury and you don't really care, you know, there could be a time where you do something wrong and you might find yourself in that same position, doing something wrong, turning against the law. You might be in a car accident and accidentally kill someone, but maybe you did have 3 drinks before you did that, and now everyone wants to put this blame on you for drinking 3 drinks, when really you as in the jury or the people convicting that person, you have drunken 3 drinks in a car many times. Hence, this same scenario could have played out in loads of different cases. But say you're just the unlucky one who had 3 drinks and ended up killing someone, you could go to prison for life, and you don't realize how much this hurts to know that this could happen, or your whole life could be ruined because of it. And yet there's plenty of other people that have had 3 drinks and they're driving around, you know, as if nothing bad is going to happen, just like you were driving around like nothing bad was going to happen. And therefore you need to learn to put yourself in other people's positions and say, you know, how likely is it that this same thing could have happened to me? Or when it comes to this accident, you know, what was the reason or intent of it? You know, I do hear of cases where someone's done like a bungee jump or something and the rope has snapped and that person has died, and then the parents have gone and sued that company for huge amounts of money, even though they generally didn't mean for this to happen. You know, you could destroy someone's life over something like this, even though these people were just generally trying to entertain and help people. You know, how fair is it to place all the anger that you have on something like this onto people? I don't know how many times this has happened, but I bet there's loads of people who have lost a parent or child or sibling or aunt, and they've just put a huge amount of blame onto the company. And they don't care. They don't care about the people that it's going to affect, the businesses that are going to be lost because of it. They're not going to care if the company closes down and the people around aren't going to be able to use their company or enjoy the entertainment they were going to do. You know, they just don't care. They just are so selfish that they just think about themselves and, you know, the loss of their loved one. You know, sometimes accidents on roller coasters happen, and okay, it's a terrible thing and you need to fix it so that it doesn't happen again. But if a roller coaster is closed for 6 months, you know, think of all the people that are visiting that park that are going to not be able to use that roller coaster because of this, I don't know, one accident. And okay, it's a bad thing, but you know, sometimes you have to accept that sometimes accidents do happen. But suing the company for millions of pounds isn't really going to help the issue, because this is millions of pounds that they could have spent on, you know, building more attractions or making the attractions safer, and not just spending it on the accident that happened. Okay, you need some compensation, but I feel like some of the things that I've heard is just way over the top and is only going to be harming the company, because they're going to live in fear almost. You know, they're not going to want to run theme parks if there's a high potential of an accident happening and, you know, the people involved having to pay them millions of pounds to sort of cover the losses. And that's a shame, because theme parks are things that are enjoyed by a huge number of people. So I wish these people involved would think about, you know, the huge amount of joy that comes from it, even though there is, you know, the occasional accident. So you need to just try and prevent it from happening again. So, okay, it needs to close down so you can figure out what went wrong. But I have heard cases where roller coasters have been closed down for like months and months and months because of it. And the people are the ones that are losing out, because these sort of things are based for, you know, the people and the uses. And I'm not even convinced that they really did love that person. You know, sometimes I feel like the love that they have towards that person isn't actually that strong. They're just so angry that they want to just take out their anger and use this sort of accident as a way of proving that, you know, something's terribly wrong and these people are terrible and stuff. And it's just hatred and people trying to reflect and hurt others using their hatred. And okay, this is what insurance is for, but say that company, if that company didn't have insurance, you know, sometimes people do just set up small things thinking, assuming that nothing's going to happen, and then something bad does happen. You can't be destroying someone's life over an accident that they didn't mean to happen. You know, I feel like some people need to come to terms with the fact that sometimes deaths do happen like this, and you shouldn't just be using your anger as a way of attacking people. You know, if you are taking sort of low drugs, whatever that be, and you get caught, you know, if you wouldn't want to be put in jail for an extensive period of time because of it, then why should others go through that same thing if you yourself might have found yourself in that same position? If you are a nanny and you're looking after someone's kid and you happen to cross the road to go to a park and an accident does happen to the kid, you know, you can't be sued for huge amounts of money for a mistake that you didn't mean to happen. And say you were looking after the kid, it's just, you know, accidents happen sometimes. So people need to think about this before destroying someone's life with suing people over things.
And also, I can't emotionally release the reason why I sin. In fact, in most cases, I'm addicted to retaining the reason why I sin, because that justifies the sin in the first place.
I think what you're saying by that is if I've done something wrong in the past, you're going to continue doing that same thing, because then it kind of justifies that what you did wrong in the past is actually the correct way of thinking. So if courts make mistakes on judgments, they would use that same mistake on lots of other people, because it kind of justifies the fact that they think that, you know, what they've done on other people is the correct thing, hence why they can continue doing it because it's the correct thing, when really it never was the correct thing. And they need to stop, and they need to stop telling themselves that what they're doing is the correct thing, but because they don't want to admit that they were wrong in the past, they don't want to change. Yes, I agree with that, but it's weird how you're saying things but you're not actually saying things. This is why I feel like I connect with you. I feel like the Spirit is talking to you and telling you things that are inspiring me to say things, and you know, this is why I feel a strong connection with you. Only it's weird because you don't seem to know what it is that I'm going to say. But anyway, I've just said it. I know that I'm relating things to more important matters such as courts and the judicial series, things I can't say, social services. But yeah, this also can apply to everyday people in their everyday life. sometimes if you have bad habits in your past, you can continue doing those bad habits. Say if you are okay with slapping kids, you know, you might want to justify that it's okay to slap your child in this circumstance. Why? Because you've done it before, and you want to kind of back up that you think it was right before, hence it's still right now, and you're going to still do it because you still believe that what you did in the past was right. You know, there's some people that just don't like changing. They don't want to admit that they were wrong so they can continue doing what they do. And I think you're doing the same. You know, you're preaching kind of lies and things that aren't really true, or things that don't really make sense, but you're continuing to do it because you are backing up, you know, what you've said before. You've made statements, you believe you're Jesus, you believe that you're preaching and you're here to preach about things, and so you're going to continue doing what you feel you're meant to do because it backs up what you've done in your past. You know, I understand that, although yours is not really a sin in my case, because I think you're doing what I want, but I don't think the audience is actually understanding it in the way that they should.
So I'm addicted to saying to myself, I would like to retain my motivation to sin, because then I can say that I sin and I don't really understand it, and I don't really get it, and I don't really know why I keep doing it.
Now what I want to know is, did your spirit just get you to say that because you don't want to know who I am, you don't want to know that I'm God, but rather you want to continue thinking whatever you want to think or whatever you believed in your past, so that when we both go on trial, you know, you as Jesus and me as Christ, you know, you can continue in your belief, in your same preaching. You know, do you know about me? I don't know. I can't say this, but you saying that kind of hints to me that maybe you don't know who I am as the real God. You know, sin is turning against God, and technically I am God, but if you don't know I'm God, or if you haven't seen the evidence to back up that I'm God, then you are going to probably preach your belief and continue sinning against me, even though you think it's the truth. But yeah, you don't understand it because you don't know that I'm God, and you don't know what I'm saying. You know, is this what you're saying? I don't know, because you haven't really been doing much in the last 2 years. So I don't know. I will find out when I start talking to people what it is that you know. But yeah, I know if you start knowing who God is, you might realize that you are sinning with what you're preaching, because, well, like you said earlier in the video, you said that God is having sex all the time or something like that, and you just need to become one with God by having sex acts and stuff. I don't really know, but a lot of things you preach are not the truth, like the spirit realm and how you can have tea and coffee with Abraham and all the other biblical characters and stuff. You know, if you knew that that was wrong, you probably wouldn't preach it. So maybe you're not supposed to know the truth, because that will continue to motivate you to preach lies. So maybe that's what you're saying. And maybe the same thing could be said with the angel of Jesus. You know, I don't know if he knows about me or not. I mean, I think he does, but maybe he doesn't. You know, I think, what about the angel of war? You know, does she know that she's the angel of war? Does she know about me? I don't know who knows or who doesn't know, but I know that people want to believe that they're doing the right thing. Now, there are a lot of names that have the wrong titles. Now, if they don't know that they have negative titles, you know, they'll be far more tempted to just preach under their positive titles and be sort of ignorant or not know about their negative titles. Hence, they'll be more willing to want to get involved. If they knew that they had a negative title and that they're actually turning against God, or if their role is to turn against me, you know, if they don't believe me, it would be a lot more a believable story, whatever they say, to disprove me.
And it's a way of letting yourself off the hook, really, isn't it? For examination. So attitudes to sin are very, very important. And understanding my attitudes to sin helps me become a more logical person, not driven by the frenzy of addiction. So for most of us, most of our sins are tied up with our addictions. So you can see that your attitude to sin is going to be changed if you no longer honour your addictions.
To explain that better, this is the counterfeit Christ. So he is basically Jesus and he represents me, and he gets his serotonin from being who he is, which is preaching kind of a similar thing to what he was preaching before, only telling a more modern day version of it, which is mixing biblical accountings of things with spirituality. I feel because he does that, I can link quite strongly to him because he's constantly trying to link to me, and he's not just talking about like the dead auntie of people. I can't connect to that, but I can connect to a lot of things that he's saying, even though I think he's saying it wrong or understanding it wrong. But his addiction is to play the part of a sort of the Antichrist, a liar, and that's what feeds him. But I feel like he also needs to come off as trustworthy, someone who wants to help, someone who has conquered his own addictions, someone who's conquered sin. And the best way to kind of pretend that you've conquered sin is to preach about how to conquer it, whilst sort of pretending that you yourself have conquered it and understood it, when really I think you're actually just talking about yourself who has not understood it because you do not know who God is.
But for most of us, we want to honour our addictions. We want our addictions met. And we have no intention of giving up our addictions if we analyse things truthfully. In addition, there's the issue of coming to have faith in God and God's laws and God's morality. If we don't understand our attitudes, we won't see that our faith is corrupted. In other words, we have faith in things that are not even true.
Yeah, I mean, take you for example. You think that God is some sort of spirit that lives in, I don't know, the 25th, 22nd heaven, I think I heard you talk about in that other video. And you think that Abraham is real and Noah is real and these are all real people and the events of the Bible are real, true stories. But yeah, you're putting your faith in something that's not true, whilst trying to make out that everyone else, not you, but everyone else is trying to put their sort of addictions or their trust in something that's not true.
Now, remember yesterday in the Q&A, we were talking, I think it was to Sean, no, it was Alex, about the pain. How he had faith that the pain that you have to deal with is going to be far worse than the pain you're already in, right? Not understanding actually the pain of dealing with things is actually a lot less and a lot shorter duration than the pain we create through sin. So there's an example of how we have faith in something that's just completely not true.
I'm looking at the audience's faces and I'm just thinking that they don't have a clue what you're talking about, and neither do I. Let me get this straight.
How we had faith that the pain that you have to deal with is going to be far worse than the pain you're already in.
The pain you're going to have to deal with is going to be far worse than the pain you're already in. So trying to get out of pain, you get into more pain. I'm sure everyone's just going, here comes that cricket again. Cheep, 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 cheep. They can't understand what you're talking about. I feel like what you're hinting at is that the pain of learning the truth that God is a female and learning that the Bible is just kind of fictional stories, this is going to be something that is going to cause them lots and lots of pain. But yeah, right now they're in a really bad state and they want the answers, but I feel like when they get the answers, they're going to be shocked that, they're so bad as to believe rubbish and lies, and so bad as to believe that they've been preaching for God, working for God, helping God. I've heard loads of people say that if they died and went to heaven and met God and God said, I'm very disappointed with you, they've said that I would be so disappointed, like, what, I've spent my whole life working for you and this is all you say, that I'm a disappointment. And it's just like, oh my God, if you knew the truth, you're not just a disappointment to me. I hate you. I despise you. I think you're nothing. You mean nothing to me. You spent your whole life just preaching about a God that doesn't exist. You haven't been helping me. The amount of things that I want to say to them about how angry I am. And then to think that if I just told them just these simple words, I'm disappointed. If they think that God telling them that God is disappointed in them, if that is going to cause them, a huge amount of pain, what kind of pain are they going to feel when they learn the absolute truth, which is that I despise the human race, all of you. You're not just a disappointment. You have rejected me and you want nothing to do with me, and what all the things you've done in your life means nothing to me because you're not helping me, you're not promoting me. I've got a tiny shitty house. I can't do anything because no one wants to listen to me because they just see me as a human, or they think I can't possibly be a god because I'm a female and I'm nothing like the description of what people promote God to be. It's like humans are a computer system or something, I think the pain that they're going to feel is going to be great. Hence why I think the rapture should happen before people learn the truth about how much I hate this world. Because after they learn the truth about how much God hates them, they might actually just cause problems by physical war and stuff. AJ might be able to help with this. Because he preaches about the importance of getting into the spirit realm and getting into the higher levels of the spirit realm.
And unless we come to have faith in what is true, God, God's laws, God's love, God's morality, unless we come to have that, we're never going to change on these issues. But to see that we don't have a proper faith, we need to understand our attitudes to the whole thing. And one of our attitudes, obviously, is prevent pain at all costs. That's one of our attitudes. And ironically, when you have an attitude of preventing pain at all cost, you generally create far more pain than what you're currently in.
So in other words, you ignore the fact that you could be wrong about who you think God is, or wrong about the fact that, the Bible is God's word, to stop you from going through the pain of believing that this is all not the truth. You kind of dig yourself further into the belief that this is the truth and that this is how you connect with God, and that people like Jacob and Abraham and Noah, these are all the people that God likes, So you see that is how you need to be to get God to like you. But by doing that, you find yourself just digging into a bigger pit full of more lies, more inversion of truth, because, the Bible is not God's word. It is not God. It is a book written by man, and you don't have to follow it. But yeah, by believing that you do, you just create a false perception of things, and you are going to set yourself up for more pain.
So these are things that we need to analyse. We also need to understand your attitudes so that you can bring your beliefs and life into harmony or alignment with God's truth. Right? So we need to do that too.
I think that's about lining up your spirit with God's spirit so that they work together rather than opposing of each other. But yeah, AJ doesn't have this truth and doesn't really know who I am, or at least he doesn't at this point. So yeah, you're never going to find answers from people who are teaching about things they don't actually know. That would be like, asking for questions about a complicated maths test, but asking your gym teacher the answers. If the gym teacher doesn't know much about maths, you're never going to find the answers you seek.